Between fact and legend of the stories that haunt us, today we explore a ship found sailing without a soul on board, 10 lives that simply vanished. Let's begin. It's November 1872 in New York Harbor. There's a woman who stands on a pier watching longshoremen load barrels into a merchant vessel's hold, and in her arms, a 2-year-old girl with curious eyes studies the seabirds wheeling overhead. Beside them both, a man in a captain's coat checks his pocket watch. He's done this 1,000 times before, prepared a ship for voyage, kissed loved ones goodbye, and promised to return. But this time is different. This time, his family is coming with him. Sarah Elizabeth Briggs, she'd made a choice. Rather than wait months for her husband's return, she would share this voyage. She packed her harmonium, a small pump organ for shipboard entertainment. She brought picture books for their young daughter Sophia, a rocking horse, the child's favorite doll. They would see Genoa together. Perhaps a brief holiday in Italy. It was meant to be romantic, perhaps, adventurous, a family voyage before Benjamin would retire from deep-water sailing. The ship's name was painted in fresh letters across her stern, Mary Celeste, and within 4 weeks, she would become the most famous ghost ship in maritime history. And Sarah, Benjamin, little Sophia, and 7 experienced sailors would simply cease to exist. Let me tell you about the people, not because the manner of their disappearance matters most to this story, but because they were real. They had names, they had plans, they expected to come home. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs was 37 years old, a veteran of Atlantic crossings with an impeccable reputation. He was born into a maritime family in Massachusetts. He'd been sailing since childhood. His father was a captain, his brothers were captains. The sea was in his blood, like salt. His logbooks from previous voyages show a man of methodical habits and deep religious faith. He conducted services for his crews. He settled disputes fairly. He even managed to avoid gambling and drinking that had plagued so many other voyages on so many other ships. He was, by all accounts, exactly the kind of man you would trust with your life at sea. This was supposed to be one of his last voyages. Briggs planned to use the profits to buy a small coastal trading business, something that would keep him closer to home as Sophia grew older. The dreams of a careful man approaching middle age. Then we have his wife, Sarah Elizabeth Briggs. She was 31, an educated woman from a prosperous family. She'd chosen to marry a sea captain despite the long separation that such a life demanded. Previous letters show a woman of strong faith and gentle humor, devoted to her husband and to their daughter. She was an accomplished musician. She wrote detailed letters to her mother about their voyages. In one letter, sent just before departure, she noted, "We are having lovely weather. Sophia's getting to be quite the little talker." 2-year-old Sophia, Matilda Briggs. That was their only child that survived infancy. Previous children had died young, and making her especially precious to the couple. The ship's manifest shows that her parents had packed toys, picture books, even a small rocking horse. They'd prepared for almost every need she would have on this long voyage. They'd planned activities to keep her entertained, and most of all, comfortable. They'd probably imagined her playing on the deck under Mediterranean sunshine. What about the crew? They were all experienced sailors, men who had sailed with Briggs before, who trusted his judgment. First mate Albert Richardson was 28. He'd served under Briggs for 2 years. Second mate Andrew Gilling, steward Edward Head, who would have prepared Sarah's meals and looked after young Sophia. 4 German sailors, the Lorenzen brothers, Volkert and Boaz, along with Arian Harbens and Gottlieb Krautschal. These weren't desperate men fleeing shore troubles. They were professionals at the height of their careers. 10 people, 10 futures. And on November 7th, 1872, they walked up the gangplank of the Mary Celeste together. None of them would ever walk down her again. Their destination, Genoa, Italy. Their cargo, 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial grade, worth a small fortune. A routine voyage across familiar waters, the kind made 1,000 times by 1,000 ships. But the Atlantic had other plans. The Mary Celeste departed New York on November 7th, and for the next 18 days, the voyage appears to have been entirely unremarkable. Captain Briggs kept his log with characteristic precision. Positions were recorded, weather was noted, all appeared well. Then, November 24th, 1872, the final entry. The ship's position places her within sight of the Azores, St. Mary's Island visible to the northwest. Weather fair, moderate seas, nothing remarkable, and then silence. The log simply ends, as if someone set down the pen meaning to return in a moment, as if the next entry was always about to be written. Somewhere in the hours that followed, perhaps that very evening, perhaps over the next few days, something happened aboard the Mary Celeste. We'll never know what it was. We only know what came after. December 5th, 1872, 11 days after that final log entry. The British brigantine Dea Gratia cuts through moderate seas between Portugal and Gibraltar. Captain David Morehouse spots a sail on the horizon. Another merchant vessel? Nothing unusual in these busy shipping lanes, but something troubles him. The ship's movement is wrong. She yaws and drifts, her sails poorly set, responding to wind, like a ship without purpose, without direction, without a hand at the wheel. Through his spyglass, Morehouse recognizes her. The Mary Celeste, a vessel he knows all too well, for her captain, Benjamin Briggs, is a friend. They had dined together in New York before departure. "Ship ahoy!" Morehouse calls across the water. Silence. He calls again. Silence. The Mary Celeste drifts like a sleepwalker, sailing toward nothing. No one appears on her deck. Oliver Deveau, the Dea Gratia's first mate, then leads a boarding party. They row across the choppy water between the ships, expecting to find sickness, injury, some explanation for the eerie quiet. Instead, they step into a maritime riddle that will haunt the world for the next century and a half. The boarding party's boots echo on wet planks as they climb aboard. The deck is deserted but orderly. Ropes hang loose but not cut. The ship's compass spins freely in its housing, its glass cracked. The wheel stands unmanned, but it's what they find below deck that defies all logic. Captain Briggs' cabin is pristine, his nautical instruments arranged carefully on his desk, his logbook open, the final entry dated November 24th, 11 days ago. Weather fair? All well, nothing remarkable. Sarah's Briggs' quarters tell a story of interrupted domesticity. Her sewing basket sits open, needle still threaded, as if she'd just set down her work. Her harmonium, the pump organ that she'd brought for shipboard entertainment, stands open. Sheet music still on the stand. A half-finished letter to her mother lies on the table. The inkwell is dry, but the words still waiting to be completed. And in the smallest cabin, Sophia's nursery. Toys arranged neatly, clothes folded, her doll sitting upright as if waiting for small hands to return. Her bed is made. The rocking horse stands motionless. Everything suggests a family that expected to return. The crew's quarters show the same inexplicable normalcy. Sailors' chests remain locked, their pipes, their books, their personal effects, all untouched. Coffee sits cold in cups, and razors lie beside shaving basins. Even their meals appear to have been interrupted mid-preparation. But the people, the 10 souls who had lived, worked, and breathed in these spaces, they've simply ceased to exist. In the cargo hold, Oliver Deveau makes a crucial discovery. 9 of the 1,701 alcohol barrels have leaked, their contents evaporating into the confined space. The air has the slightest reek of industrial fumes, but 1,692 barrels remain perfectly intact. Very valuable contents, undisturbed. The ship's only lifeboat is gone, along with navigational instruments, some personal effects, but here's what chills Deveau to the bone. No emergency provisions were taken, no water barrels, no food stores, as if whoever left expected to return within mere hours. At Gibraltar, British authorities impound both vessels, pending investigation. Captain Morehouse and his crew face immediate suspicion. They stand to gain considerably from salvage rights to the Mary Celeste and that valuable cargo. Frederick Solly Flood, Gibraltar's Attorney General, conducts the inquiry personally, with the thoroughness of a criminal investigation. He is a man of suspicious temperament, and he is convinced that something sinister has occurred. He brings divers to examine the ship's hull for signs of deliberate damage, but nothing is found. The launch appears orderly. A thorough search reveals more mysteries. The ship's official papers are missing, except for the log. Why would someone take documents but leave the cargo manifest? The chronometer and sextant are gone from the captain's cabin, suggesting someone prepared for navigation, but the barometer, it remains along with other valuable instruments. And most puzzling, there's no signs of violence, no blood, no damage from weapons or a struggle, no indications of piracy. Pirates don't abandon valuable cargo and carefully fold a child's clothing. The missing lifeboat suggests an orderly evacuation. But an evacuation from what? Solly Flood is convinced the crew murdered the Briggs family, or perhaps Morehouse conspired with Briggs to stage an elaborate insurance fraud, or the crew got drunk on the alcohol cargo and committed mutiny. But none of these theories survive scrutiny. The alcohol was denatured, industrial grade, undrinkable, in fact, poisonous. And there was no financial motive for fraud. The ship was adequately but not excessively insured. Briggs had no debts. Most crucially, he would never have staged his family's disappearance for money. And the crew? These were men who had sailed with Briggs before, who trusted him, who had chosen to work under his command. So after 3 months of investigation, Solly Flood reaches the only honest conclusion possible. The court can find no evidence of foul play, but equally can find no satisfactory explanation for the abandonment of this vessel. The Mary Celeste is released to her owners. Captain Morehouse receives his salvage award, though less than expected, as Solly Flood's suspicions linger in the legal record. But the question remains, echoing through maritime history: what could have driven 10 people, including a cautious, experienced captain with his wife and child, to choose the uncertainty of an open boat over the safety of a sound ship? In the 150 years since her discovery, the Mary Celeste has spawned more theories than perhaps any mystery in maritime history. Each generation projects its own fears onto her empty deck, finding in her silence whatever terrifies them most about the unknown. The rational explanations came first, proposed by maritime experts who understood the sea's capacity for violence. There were seaquake theories, underwater earthquakes that can and do create phenomena that terrifies even experienced sailors. Sudden waterspouts, freak waves, seismic disturbances that make a ship feel as if it is breaking apart. A severe seaquake may have convinced Briggs to evacuate temporarily. As for the waterspout theory, these oceanic tornadoes can appear with little warning, creating a terrifying spectacle of wind and water. A waterspout approaching the ship may have also prompted evacuation. But once in the lifeboat, the crew could only watch as their ship sailed away from the danger and from them. Then we have the alcohol vapor theory. This remains the most widely accepted explanation. Those 9-leak barrels created highly flammable vapors, and if these vapors reached a critical concentration, Captain Briggs, knowing his wife and child were on board, might have ordered immediate evacuation. The plan, perhaps, to wait in the lifeboat until the air cleared and then return. But here's where every theory breaks down. Experienced sailors don't abandon ships for fumes alone. They ventilate holds, they pump bilges, they fight to save their vessel. Maritime law and survival instinct both dictate that you stay with your ship until it is actively sinking. Then came the theatrical theories, emerging as the story spread beyond maritime circles. Piracy. But again, what pirate abandons valuable cargo, and why would they leave everything so meticulous as if it had just been frozen in time? Or mutiny. But again, the crew had sailed with Captain Briggs before, and he was known as being fair and temperate, and mutineers don't usually murder the captain's wife and infant daughter. They put them ashore. We also have government conspiracies, secret cargo, weapons, gold, intelligence that made the ship perhaps a target for covert forces. But the manifest was thoroughly examined. The cargo was exactly what it claimed to be. And then we have the supernatural theories, fed by a public hungry for mystery. Sea monsters, giant squids, sea serpents, undiscovered leviathans capable of plucking crews from ships without damaging the vessels themselves. Crazy theories like time displacement, the ship slipped through some temporal anomaly, returning her cargo, but keeping her people. A cursed ship, The Mary Celeste had experienced previous misfortunes, fires, accidents, changes of ownership under unfortunate circumstances. Sailors whispered that she was marked by fate. But here's what troubles me personally about all of these theories. They assume something extraordinary happened. What if the truth is more terrifying because it is ordinary? Try to imagine it. November 25th, 1872, the morning after the final log entry, or perhaps a day later, we'll never know exactly when, something happens aboard the Mary Celeste. Not a monster, not a ghost, something far more mundane, but in the moment, more terrifying. Perhaps a rumbling from below. The leaked alcohol barrels have been releasing fumes into the hold for days. Maybe a hatch cover blows off suddenly with violence, propelled by vapor pressure that had been building in the enclosed space. To a captain with his wife and child, it might look and sound like the beginning of an explosion, or perhaps a seaquake, the ship suddenly lurching, groaning as if her timbers were giving way. False readings on the depth sounder, the terrifying sensation that the ocean floor itself had risen to meet them. Captain Briggs makes a decision, a reasonable decision given the information he has. Abandon ship. Wait in the lifeboat until the danger passes. He orders the lifeboat prepared, takes the navigational instruments just in case, leaves the provisions. They'll only be gone an hour, maybe two, and the ship isn't sinking, the cargo is intact. They will return as soon as it is safe. Sarah gathers Sophia, wraps her in a blanket against the November cold. Perhaps she looks back at the harmonium, thinking she'll play it again this evening. Perhaps she glances at the half-finished letter to her mother, planning to complete it after dinner. The crew lowers the boat. Everyone climbs in. Someone trails a rope behind them tied to the ship, a painter's line, a tether to their entire world. They row to what they believe is a safe distance, and then they simply wait. But no explosion comes, no disaster. The Mary Celeste rides calmly at anchor. But something else happens. Something no one expected. The wind shifts. Suddenly, violently, the Mary Celeste sails catch the gust, and she lurches forward, and that painter's line, the thin rope connecting the boat to the ship, snaps taut, then breaks. Or perhaps it was never properly secured in the haste of evacuation. Either way, the result is the same. The Mary Celeste begins to sail away, unmanned, unstoppable, driven by wind that fills her canvas with terrible efficiency. And in the lifeboat, 10 people watch their ship, their shelter, their provisions, their only hope of survival grow smaller against the horizon. They row. Of course they row, desperately, frantically, their arms burning as they pull against the Atlantic swells. But a lifeboat cannot catch a ship under sail. The mathematics are absolutely merciless, and the Mary Celeste grows smaller and smaller and smaller, until finally she drops below the horizon, and they are alone, utterly alone. No provisions, no water. November in the North Atlantic, where the water temperature is cold enough to kill within hours. A small boat designed for emergency evacuation, not for extended survival. I imagine Sarah holding Sophia close, trying to keep her warm. I imagine Benjamin Briggs watching the empty horizon, understanding with growing horror what he has done. I imagine the sailors rowing until their strength failed, then drifting, then, one by one, passing away, until the Atlantic claimed them all. Meanwhile, the Mary Celeste sailed on, obedient to the wind, carrying her cargo, her toys, her half-finished letter, towards a destination she would never reach. For 11 days she drifted alone, a ship sailing through nightmares of everyone who would ever hear her story, until the Dei Gratia found her, and the mystery began. The Mary Celeste would return to service, but she carried her mystery like a curse. Her new owners found crews reluctant to sail her. So sailors are suspicious by nature. They have to be, trusting their lives to wind and weather and luck. Word soon spread through maritime communities that the ship was jinxed, haunted, marked by whatever had taken her previous crew. Her subsequent voyages were plagued by misfortune, cargo spoiled, crews quarreled and fought, owners faced bankruptcy, captain after captain found reasons to leave her command. Perhaps the curse wasn't supernatural. It was economic. Mysteries make for poor business. Shippers grew reluctant to trust valuable cargoes to a vessel associated with the unexplained. Insurance rates climbed. The most experienced crews chose other berths. the Mary Celeste would become a floating pariah, her reputation preceding her into every port. And in 1885, 13 years after the mystery, she met her final fate in a scenario both tragic and, well, fitting. Her current captain, Captain Gilman Parker, deliberately ran her aground on a reef off Haiti. It was a clumsy insurance fraud. He'd loaded the ship with worthless cargo while claiming it was valuable, then accidentally wrecked her in shallow water, where the deception could be easily discovered. The scheme failed spectacularly. Investigation revealed the fraud within days, and Parker faced prosecution, but would die before trial. The Mary Celeste herself declared a total loss, her hull breaking apart on the reef where greed had finally finished what mystery had began. She died as she had lived her final years, abandoned, betrayed by the very people who should have protected her. But death couldn't end her story. Arthur Conan Doyle, in one of his earliest published stories, invented a tale of blood-stained decks and mysterious slaughter. His fiction became more famous than the facts, spawning countless imitators. Hollywood would then discover her story. Television documentaries attempted to solve the riddle. Each retelling moved further from the truth and closer to myth. The Mary Celeste soon became whatever each storyteller needed her to be: evidence of alien intervention, proof of oceanic monsters, symbol of humanity's vulnerability to forces beyond understanding. But the real story, 10 people making a fatal decision based on imperfect information, would become lost in the noise of sensationalism. And yet somewhere in the North Atlantic, on a day we'll never know, 10 voices called across the water until the cold and distance claimed each of them. The ocean doesn't care about our good intentions. It doesn't reward careful planning or prudent caution. It simply is vast, indifferent, and governed by physics rather than justice. Every goodbye, potentially final. Every routine journey carries the possibility of interruption. In maritime museums around the world, models of the Mary Celeste sit in glass cases, her mystery reduced to educational plaques and replica artifacts. Visitors read the basic facts, shake their head perhaps at the strangeness of it all, and then move on to the next exhibit. But late at night, when the museums are empty and darkness fills the space between displays, something more than history lingers in those halls. The Mary Celeste sails still, not on any ocean that appears on charts, but in the deeper waters of human consciousness. She whispers across time the same message that she's carried for 150 years. Pay attention, notice who's there. Remember that routine voyage and never returned are separated by mere heartbeats. Some ships carry cargo, others carry warnings. The Mary Celeste carried both. And somewhere in the vast silence between waves, 10 voices still call across water that never answers back.